Before the camera's rolling. Alrighty, Chapter 6, Land Use Controls. So remember, it's sort of a building block process, the way these chapters are laid out. We started with just a basic definition of land, that's Chapter 1. And then Chapter 2 is all about the different ways you could own land. And then Chapter 3 was about things called encumbrances or limitations. Well, these are types of limitations. This is just more detailed information because these are controls, limits on what you can do with your property. Whereas Chapter 3 was about limits that are placed on individual properties, like, for example, a lien or a restriction that a grantor had placed on the property. This chapter is all about limitations that would be for everybody, like, for example, zoning ordinances or those kinds of things. I'm quickly not moving here. There we go. Is it not working? Oh, that's why it's not working. It would help. Plug that in. Hey, what do you know? There we go. So we have two main categories of land use controls: public controls and private controls. Public controls are ones that come from some form of government. So they are from the city, they're from the county, they're from the state. Who do you think is going to enforce a public land use control? Who would you call if somebody's breaking a public control? Somebody's breaking a law passed by the state or a law passed by the city. Who are you going to call? The police. This would be a police enforcement action for these public land use controls. There are also private land use controls, like restrictive covenants or protective covenants. It's not going to be the police who would enforce those. Who do you think would enforce private land use controls?
HOA.
Well, the HOA, if there is one, what if there's not an HOA? Who is the HOA?
Your neighbors.
It's your neighbors, right? And that's who ultimately enforces these private controls. Your neighbors. And here's the lesson for you. It doesn't even have to be plural. It could be your neighbor. How many does it take to enforce those rules? Just one. That's it. One. One other owner in that subdivision could enforce those private controls. So when we talk about public controls, there are several different categories. The first ones we're going to talk about is something called planning and zoning. Planning and zoning. This is the biggest example of a public land use control that we probably have. If you've never encountered zoning ordinances before, welcome to your nightmare for as long as you're involved in real estate. Because zoning ordinances are exceptionally strict. They control everything about what a property can be used for. These things tell you what you can do with property that you own if it's located in a city. The state of North Carolina decided a long time ago that cities needed to have the right to control development within their boundaries. And so they've given this power to the cities so that every one of them can plan for things. You don't need to memorize these things, by the way. These are just examples of the kinds of things that a master plan, even master plan, doesn't that sound scary? Like when you think about your city has a master plan for what you do with your property. It just sounds like Big Brotherish, doesn't it? Well, it is. It is, and it's meant to be that way. So the state of North Carolina has given this control to the cities through something called police power. Police power is the ability to control you and what you do with your property by the police. You need to know this, the enabling acts are the laws that give them that authority. They enable them to control you. Here's the other thing you need to know about zoning. There is no such thing as a statewide zoning ordinance. All zoning is done at the local level. That can be good or bad. generally speaking, in most things in your life, if you get a decision you don't like, there's almost always a higher authority to sort of appeal to. Does that make sense? If you sue somebody and you lose, can you usually appeal? And if you don't like the result of the appeal, can you go one step higher sometimes and appeal? Yeah, there's almost always a step higher, except in the case of zoning. You don't like their decision? Too bad. There is no appeal process. There's no going above their head. So, do you think there might be some little tyrants in some cities around North Carolina that have an iron death grip on control of their little town and what you can do within the boundaries of their little town? Yes. And you can't fight them. There is no fighting them, because that planning and zoning board has been given all of that authority by the state of North Carolina to control what you do with your property. And the state's response would be, if you don't like it, leave it. Get out. Go to another city. Go to an unincorporated area, because as long as you're in that city, they have the control over your property. I'm making that sound intentionally bad, but I want you to understand how strong these are. Don't feel like you're going to go make some sob story case of somebody go, they won't let me do what I want to do. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And then nobody's going to do anything about it. Nobody is. Everybody all right with that? That's the idea of these zoning things. So types of things that zoning might control. Permitted uses. This is the biggest one. What can that piece of land be used for? Can it be used for residential purposes? Can it be used for commercial purposes? And not all commercial is created the same. It might be, maybe it's okay for a retail facility, but it's not okay for a gas station. Maybe it's okay for a restaurant, but it's not okay for a restaurant that serves alcohol. Maybe it's okay for a daycare facility, but it's not okay for a pediatrician's office. Those are the kind of controls we're talking about on these properties. And yes, they do get that specific. Don't think that it's, oh, it's zoned commercial. That means I can do anything I want to with it that's commercial. No, no, no. There'll be lists sometimes that are pages and pages long of what the allowed uses are. And guess what? If you want to do something that's not on the allowed use for that property, can you do it? No. No. You cannot. You certainly cannot. Lot sizes, how big the lots must be, usually like minimum lot sizes especially. Like for example, not all residential zones are created the same. There'll be some residential zones with minimum lot sizes of a ½ acre. There'll be some residential zones with minimum lot sizes of 1/10 of an acre. There'll be some residential zones that allow townhouses and some that won't. So there's all kinds of lot size restrictions. The type of structures that are allowed, building heights, setback requirements, all those things are types of things that zoning attempts to control. Let me try to give you a visual image of why this is an important thing. Because zoning can be executed well, or it can be executed poorly. And we are fortunate enough in our area to have two very vivid examples of zoning that has been well executed. Now, I'm not saying that you'll like that result, I'm just saying it's been well executed. Almost every planner in the country looks to one city in our area to say, that's it. That's what we want. That's our goal right there. It is the gold standard of zoning ordinances. Because zoning ordinances seek to have everything look in place. You ever been in somebody's house and you thought, you ain't even real? There is no way people live here because it's just way too perfect, right? We have one of those in this area. I live in it. What is it? Cary. See how you all knew what it was before I even said the name? Cary, literally, is where the Urban Planners Association meets every year. You know why? Because they ride them around in a bus and say, this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what every city in America is supposed to look like from the planner's perspective. And the reason is, from a planner's perspective, everything has a place. And does everything have a place in Cary? Yes. It does. It's very consistent. One thing you cannot complain about in Cary is you never like just stumble into like an industrial area, right? You never like are, well God, I was in a neighborhood and now I'm in a shopping center. How did that happen? It doesn't work that way in Cary because everything is very clearly delineated. You know where you are. You don't see signs that are 80 feet tall, and you don't see different construction types and all just hodgepodge of things because it's been very detailed planned. Now you may not like that. That's okay. I'm not saying you have to like it. Some people do and some people don't. But it is a very good example of what the goal of zoning is. We also have the other example in our area. We have a city that has grown exponentially over the years, pretty much on the same time frame that Cary has grown. And the planners of that city have never been consistent about applying any kind of zoning ordinances. So you'll have a mattress store and a car dealership next to a daycare, and here's 3 houses, and now here's an apartment complex. Oh, and here's a driving range, and there's a Walmart, and here's a restaurant, and here's a nuclear waste dump, and I mean, it's like nothing makes sense. And it creates a traffic nightmare.
Raleigh.
North.
Raleigh.
Raleigh's too old. Raleigh predates planning. Wake Forest. Have you ever tried to move from one side of Wake Forest to the other?
Yeah.
It takes 3 months to get from one side of town to the other. Because there is no continuity, and they are struggling mightily with it right now. They're trying to rein it in. You go to a planning and zoning meeting in Wake Forest, it's like World War III right now. Because they realize they have let the toothpaste get way too far out of the tube, and they're trying to rein it back in. They got traffic nightmares every which way, and they don't know how to fix it. I mean, this is the only place on earth that has a high school across the street from a fast food restaurant. Do you know how dumb you have to be to plan that? Because as soon as school lets out, what do they all do? They get in their car and they drive 15 feet across the street and they back up in the road for 3 miles trying to get in the parking lot. What moron approved that? But they've got that everywhere in Wake Forest. And listen, Wake Forest is a cute town, but so much has been sacrificed for development there. Here's the thing, Cary's grown at an even greater rate than Wake Forest has. What has Cary sacrificed in the name of development? In other words, drive around Cary. Now, what it has sacrificed is uniqueness, right? Character. That's the trade-off. But where are property values greater? See, that would be the response of an urban planning. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with them on all fronts, but it's hard to argue with the results, right? If protecting property values is your overall goal, and it is for an urban planner, it's hard to argue with the results in Cary. Does that make sense to you? So that's what they look at. They want that kind of uniformity. Now, you look at a place like Raleigh, obviously we have the hodgepodge in Raleigh, but the thing of it is, Raleigh was a city long before you had things like urban planning, where you could just do whatever you wanted to do. So you're always going to have that hodgepodge there. The much more interesting places to look at are ones that have grown up while urban planning existed. How about Knightdale? Knightdale has definitely grown while urban planning existed. And they've done probably a better job than Wake Forest has, you know, by comparison. It's almost hard to imagine somebody doing a worse job than Wake Forest. Because Wake Forest took a beautiful town and made it basically surrounded by, I mean, you know, like from all directions. It's just, I mean, it's hard to imagine a worse job of that. I mean, do you know when you're getting to Wake Forest, other than just traffic? Is there any differentiating thing? You know, that's the thing. There's nothing that tells you you have arrived in that town, and that's one of the things that. Do you know when you're in Cary?
Yes.
You hit the line and you're like, oh, I know where I am. You know, it just has a feel. That's what urban planners go for. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you know, I've been in this area, well, I think for about 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
We started from the church in Wake Forest, and when we moved up there, I mean, Wake Forest really wasn't growing that fast.
Mm-hmm.
It was very slow. But we was already hearing about carry growth. I think the carry out in Wake Forest now it's a lot more building in Wake Forest now when you go up there. And like you said, it's not as planned out, but it's almost like, seem like to me that they're so happy to get the growth that they're willing to work with, because it's just like any other.
And that's the trade-off.
They only got like 1 or 2 main roads. It's not as big as Cary, where they got several main roads. They only got.
Cary doesn't really have more than 2 main roads either. You know, but they've maintained control in a much more uniform manner, and it has allowed for that growth. It really is about control, like you said, and you said the magic thing. They're so happy to get the growth that they allow them to do what? Whatever they want. And and it does lead to growth, but it also leads to the inherent problems that come along with that. Because you take a developer, they don't care if they're creating a traffic nightmare. It doesn't bother them. Yes, ma'am.
I moved to Wake Forest when we first moved here from Texas, and it was just a 2-lane, you know, it really was. And I own 2 houses up there, and it's, like you said, really crazy. Hindsight, I would have sold a kid or a kidney and bought land in Wake Forest before all the growth. I would have been living on a private island right now.
Right, of course, sure.
Nobody knew. I mean,
and that's not to say Wake Forest isn't a great place to live still. It's just a very vivid example of the differentiation between, you know, planned versus unplanned growth. And so when you think of zoning, you should think of Cary, because that is the sort of epitome of, you know, well, from an urban planner's point of view, some people hate that. I mean, some people love the uniqueness. You know, some people love, you know, the fact that there are distinct little areas, which Cary does not have. I mean, you know, Cary is Cary. It's the same thing. Or this street looks the same as that one, and this one, and every other one. You know?
I think when you do go to Cary, you can see what old Cary, new Cary.
Sure.
You could definitely.
For sure, no question. Here's how you can tell. Those of us that live in Old Cary, we managed to survive in our 1,800 square feet. Those that live in New Cary, they need 5,000 square feet. You know, that's the main difference. You know, I always laugh, you know, because, you know, I live in a little 1,700 square foot, 1,800 square foot ranch house, but I own, you know, more than half of an acre right in downtown Cary, pretty much. And we live right down the street from McGregor Downs, and so there's houses that are half a mile from my house that are on the market for $3 million. And so I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, the house across the street's on the market for $3 million. And so they assume I live in that kind of neighborhood. No. So, but there are some vocabulary that you need to be familiar with when it comes to zoning. And so this is where the test questions are going to come from. The first one that's going to show up on the test is something called an extraterritorial jurisdiction. An ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's that second bullet point that's on the slide right there. This is an area, well, first of all, extraterritorial. Extra means outside. So outside of your territory, you still have jurisdiction. That's what extraterritorial jurisdiction means. Every city in this state not only has the authority to zone within its own boundaries, but actually gets a bubble outside of its boundaries called an extraterritorial jurisdiction. And the size of that bubble is dictated by the population of the city. That bubble ranges anywhere from 1 mile to 3 miles outside of its boundaries. Like, for example, Raleigh's is 3 miles. So, if you leave Raleigh, now not leave Raleigh and go into another city. This doesn't extend into somebody else's territory. But are there places where you can leave Raleigh and still go out into the country, where you're not in any city still? Like, for example, you go north on Creedmoor Road. When you, pretty much once you cross 540 on Creedmoor Road, you're just in Wake County at that point, not in the city of Raleigh. Does that make sense for everybody? How far outside of the city of Raleigh do you have to drive before you get outside of Raleigh's control, before you get outside of the area that they can control the land use? How far?
You said 3 miles.
3 miles. Think about that. That is a heck of a big buffer zone. Does that make sense for everybody? The idea is that and this is the reason that urban planners got this in front of the state legislature and got it passed. They basically said, you know, if you don't give us some kind of a buffer zone, all the stuff that we don't want in the city, they're going to put right where? Right outside, right on the line. You know, as soon as you get outside of town, all the bars, all the strip clubs, all the stuff we're trying to keep away from the city is going to be right outside the city limits. Well, of course, it still is right outside, but now it's outside of what? Outside of that buffer zone, outside of that extraterritorial jurisdiction.
And would it be inside that buffer zone?
No, because the city still controls that use inside the buffer zone.
So if you have the city limits and then you have a buffer zone of 3 miles,
Mhm.
then you put those strip clubs outside of the 3 miles.
Exactly, because the city's not allowing them, and the city can still stop them from being inside the buffer zone. Yes, sir,
I
JJ.
just want to see if I understand right. So Franklin County and Wade County, if I understood correctly, you said since there's another county there than.
Not county, city.
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 So then that.
So,
that
so
does
there
apply to
are properties in Franklin County which are under the city of Raleigh's zoning authority.
Not like I'm right by the Wade, right at the edge of Wade County,
Mhm.
like what's considered Franklin County. So it sounds like I can still have.
You may be in Raleigh's extraterritorial jurisdiction,
Okay.
which means the city of Raleigh may have zoning authority over your property. Does that make sense for everybody? Just like Cary has extraterritorial jurisdiction that extends well into Chatham County. If you go south on 1 and 64, like if you're going out toward Jordan Lake, out that direction, and you get south and west of Cary, headed out that direction there, you got to go 3 miles outside of Cary before you get outside of Cary's zoning authority out there. Because Cary's extraterritorial jurisdiction extends into Chatham County in that same way.
Is that also including like the land at the annex?
Well, when they annex, the bubble moves with the annex. So if they move the city line, the bubble zone also moves out.
3 more miles out.
It moves out whatever 3 miles is from the current municipal limits. The buffer zone exists. Now, here's what I want you to keep in mind about these properties. These are not property owners who own property in the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary. They do not get services from the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary. They don't get any benefit from the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary. They don't get to vote in municipal elections in the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary, but they are still under the thumb of the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary or Knightdale. Or every city in the state's got one of these buffer zones. Y'all get me on that? So this becomes a major point of contention for people that find themselves in those areas because they think they reside in the country, and they do, but then they want to put something on their property, and the city of Raleigh says, no, 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 you can't do that. And they don't think the city of Raleigh should have the right to tell them that, but they do. Let me get Michelle's and now I'll come this way.
So if you're within that territory, how do you don't get benefits from anywhere?
Nope.
SOL or LOL?
You're in the country.
Whatever. OL. Okay.
If there's you wouldn't get municipal water from the city, you would probably be on a well or have a community water supply. You don't get any services from the city because you're not inside the city's municipal limits.
You're paying taxes to them.
You're also not paying city taxes,
Yeah.
just county taxes. So the only connection you have to that city is that they control your land use.
Even though the county taxes are still pretty high.
Well, they may
I
be.
mean, I'm paying just as much as Wade, and I'm not getting anything.
Right, because you're in Franklin's tax rate's high. They don't have the tax base. Yes, ma'am.
That's the same like that in the country. And exactly what you're saying, we couldn't get anything, we weren't paying city taxes. But it was weird how they zoned it, because the country, we was in the country, but like half a mile in the city of Knightdale. But it's kind of like it was right around the corner, and it's like, they just like took that pocket out.
Right.
All around us was zoned for Knightdale or city of Raleigh.
Mhm.
It was just weird, but, and we were on totally
It-
different water.
it can be-
totally different- was just
It can be
different.
very odd when you find yourself in one. So here's an example of what might happen. Let's say you have somebody who has a lot of land in one of these extraterritorial jurisdictions. Maybe it's just, it's been vacant land, or, they've not really used it for anything, and they decide they want to go out there and open a little farmer's market on their land, which is out in the country. Except that land, that whole area is zoned for residential use. Is a farmer's market or a stand residential use? No. So the city of Raleigh comes and shuts them down. And they blow a gasket because they don't, I'm not in the city of Raleigh. Who are you to tell me what I can do with my property? But they're located in that extraterritorial jurisdiction. Does that make sense? Yep.
So how is it, like, when I say it right now, you had like, new residential areas popping up, and then they had to pay, property taxes for Wake County, whatever, for the city of Raleigh, but not for Knightdale. Like I said, it was like the next.
Well, if they were, and then they must have been in the city of Raleigh, if they were paying city of Raleigh taxes. Yeah. Well, all these boundaries, they get big territory wars, basically. Does everybody understand the idea of an extraterritorial jurisdiction? That's the main thing. Yes, ma'am, Marlo.
Well, I was kind of saying like her, because we live right outside Raleigh where Knightdale and Raleigh meets right there with East River, overburden. And that, I guess, assume that used to be a buffer territory because we don't get anything. But now, Raleigh had recently, the last couple of years before we moved there, annexed.
Has annexed.
But we still don't get nothing. We get water, we get city water.
You should get water and sewer.
Taxes, but we can't vote for a lot of stuff. You know what I'm saying? We still don't have access, can't vote for, a lot of things around.
Interesting. Because if they've annexed you, you should.
We can't. We still got a lot of voting restrictions.
Interesting. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, in the event that you would have to call 911, would that be a problem if you lived in one of those areas?
No, you live in the country. It's as simple as that. The sheriff's office coming, not the police department.
Yeah, the sheriff.
Or the
Because you don't
fire?
live in the city.
Yeah, the sheriff.
Or the ambulance, and next closest
It's
center?
whatever going to be the county service is. It's not going to be any city-based service. The city of Raleigh is not coming to put your house out if it's on fire. It's going to be whatever rural fire department services your area, because you are not located in the city of Raleigh. They have control over your use, but you are not getting any benefit from anything associated with the city, because you are not in the city.
Okay, gotcha.
Does that mean that they extend the line?
That's exactly what that means. Rosalind's question is, do they extend the line? Yes. It's a territory grab, right? They want to, Jocelyn, sorry, I said Rosalind. No, I had it in my head and I just said it wrong. I had to correct myself. But yes, they do. These cities in our area especially annex other properties.
And then that means that
The buffer line moves as well. That's exactly right. It moves with the city boundaries. That's exactly right. And one of the main reasons cities annex continually is they fight over the buffer zone. When there's an area between Raleigh and Cary, are they both going to claim control over that area?
Yes.
Yeah, because they both have an extraterritorial jurisdiction in that area. Does that make sense? So they fight over the control. Well, the best way to actually get control is to do what? Annex. Move your line out. And that's why on almost every place now, Raleigh and Cary meet in the middle, because it was a control grab to control the use of those properties.
So basically, when people are picketing, or like you see those signs, they don't want to be annexed, it doesn't even matter that they're saying that it's zoning, it is what it is.
It does matter they're saying that, because there's going to be a lot more taxes that go along with being annexed, and potentially major special assessments. What special assessment is likely coming to your doorstep if you are annexed into the city of Raleigh or the town of Cary? Water and sewer. Because by state law, if they annex you, they have to offer you utility services, and they will offer it, but they'll bill you for it. And you'll get a $15,000 assessment for new water and sewer lines.
And with all this growth that's coming here, they're pushing out the city limits. Is this why they're annexing more? Or they
Control. More control.
It's a Jenny Jackson.
Look at him. These two terms are going to show up on a test. You better know these. And here's the thing. They're not confusing. You make them way harder than they are. Here's the truth. Whenever you talk about zoning, the goal of zoning is to have everybody be in compliance, to have everybody conform with the zoning ordinances, to follow the rules. Are there going to be property owners who don't follow the rules?
Yes.
We call that a non-conforming use. It does not comply. It does not conform with the zoning ordinance. Non-conforming. Now they come in two varieties. A legal non-conforming use and an illegal non-conforming use. I'm going to see if I can break this down into a real world thing for you so you can understand the difference. How many of you have children? Alice. What's worse? Your child does something you don't like, but you don't have a rule against it. Or you have a rule, they know the rule, and they do it anyway. Which one is worse? The second one is worse. You already had the rule. You've already said, do not do this. And they did what? They did it anyway. See, the other one, they do something, you don't like it. What's at best case scenario, you can say what?
You can set a new.
Don't do it again, right? Are you with me on that?
Yes.
A legal non-conforming use is the first one. They were doing it before what existed? The rules. An illegal use is the second one. The rule was already there and it said not to do it, and they what? They did it anyway. That's why it's illegal, because the rule was already in place. You can't consider a use illegal if the use started before what?
The rules.
The rule. It's still a non-conforming use, but it's legal because it started before the rule went into effect. We also call this the grandfather rule. These properties are grandfathered in. What that means is that when zoning ordinances change, you are allowed to continue doing what you're doing currently with the property, even if what you're currently doing is against the new rule. Does that make sense? They can't just walk in and make you stop operating your gas station because they've now rezoned the property as residential. Your gas station was already there. So your gas station is going to be allowed to continue to operate as a what? A legal non-conforming use. But if somebody opens up a gas station right across the street 2 months after they pass the zoning ordinance, even though both properties are in the same zone, even though they're being used for the same thing, what's the one across the street going to be called? That is an illegal use because the use started after the rule went into effect. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Which one can be shut down? The illegal use can be shut down at any time. Which one must be allowed to continue? The legal non-conforming use. Now, listen, I don't want you to get caught and think that's a perfect world. It's not. Let me caution you against that. If you ever have a client who's interested in purchasing a commercial property that's operating as a legal non-conforming use, in other words, the thing they're doing with the property is not allowed by the current zoning, but it has to be allowed to continue because it was there first. Is everybody with me on that? So let's say, would that gas station that was out in the country be attractive to somebody to go in and purchase now if they couldn't put a gas station in that area because it was all zoned residential? Would that be an attractive gas station to purchase? Yes, it would. Here's the problem. The city does not want that gas station there. And here's how you know they don't want it there. What did they rezone the property for? Residential. Now they can't force it to stop operating because it was there before the zoning ordinance went into effect. You follow me so far? They can make your life so miserable that you shut it down yourself.
Can't say.
And they eventually will. Because they will nitpick and nickel and dime you and just bite around the edges like a little yappy dog until you finally go away. I'll give you an example. You built this gas station in 1975. You've got the main parking lot and it's paved. Well, you got a little busier a few years later, so you bought the lot next door and just put gravel out there so you had extra parking. Overflow parking. Well, over the years, that overflow parking is always busy now because you're now the only gas station in this whole huge area. So there's always people parked out there. So you get a visit from the city of Raleigh and they say, Mr. Everett, you know, your parking lot over here, talk to us about that. And I say, well, you know, it's overflow parking. We put it in years ago. And they say, well, you know, in the city of Raleigh, we require all parking facilities to be paved for public safety. It's a public safety hazard if you don't have paved parking. And I say, okay, so I got to pave the parking lot. And they say, yes, sir, you do. So now, I have to get a permit to pave that parking lot, right? I need a permit from the city of Raleigh. So I go down to the city of Raleigh's permitting office to get a permit, and they look at the property and they say, well, sir, what are you getting this permit for? And I say, to pave a parking lot. And they say, well, sir, you can't pave a parking lot in a residential zoned area. And I say, well, I'm operating as a non-conforming use. I'm a commercial facility, and they told me I had to pave this parking lot. And they said, well, sir, just because you're allowed to continue your use does not mean you're allowed to expand your use. You can't pave a new parking lot. And so I go back to the first person and they say, well, now the city tells me I can't pave the parking lot. And they go, gosh, I hate when that happens. I guess you're just going to have to stop using that parking lot. So I just lost half my parking. And then 2 years later, I get a visit from the health inspector because I've got a little grill in there. And I've got, 15 seats in there for people to come in and get a hot dog, hamburger. You know that kind of a store, right? And this thing booms all the time. It's big. And so the health inspector comes in and they're doing my normal health inspection. And the health inspector says, by the way, you're on a septic system here, aren't you? And I say, yeah, I'm still on septic. We've been here so long, it's on a septic system. They said, well, the state health code has changed now, and you cannot have this type of septic system for a food service establishment. So you're going to have a new septic system installed, or you're going to have to tap into the city system. So I go back to the city of Raleigh and I say, I need to tap onto your sewer system. And they say, well, sir, you can only tap onto the sewer system on this property for what purpose? For residential purposes. I say, okay, well then I guess I'll have to put a septic system in. And they say, well, sir, we only allow new septic systems in this area for residential. So now I go back to the health inspector and I say, well, the city won't let me tap on the system and they won't let me put in a new septic system. And the health inspector says, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we're going to have to shut your food operation down. What are they doing? Piece by piece. Because what do they want? They want residential property there. That is the path of a non-conforming use. Yes, it is allowed to continue, but eventually they will get what they want. All right? And I only tell you that not because it's going to be on a test. I tell you that because in real life, you're going to have a client one day that wants to buy one of these things. And you're going to need to caution them strongly against it, because you're going to need to explain to them why they are taking on a huge risk that the business they're buying is not going to be continuing to operate over time. I've even seen ones where they had a fire and it burned the place down. And they have insurance. And they can't rebuild it. Because the city says that would be improving your non-conforming use. You can rebuild it, but you got to rebuild it to match the current zoning.
City to burn it down.
I don't know. Are you with me on this? Now, on a test, here's what you're looking for. You're looking for timing. When did the use start, and when did the rule go into effect? Because they're going to ask you, is this a legal non-conforming use or is this an illegal use? And the only difference between the two is when the use started and when the rule went into effect. Travis has operated an attorney's office in a small home for the last 25 years in an area that's been zoned strictly residential for the last 30 years. This is an example of. When did the use start? Travis has operated an attorney's office in a small house for the last 25 years.
25 years.
In an area that has been zoned strictly for residential use for the last 30 years. This is an example of what? That is an illegal use. An illegal use. Because when did the use start? After the rule. The rule went into effect 30 years ago. The use started 25 years ago. That's an illegal use. I don't care that it's been going on 25 years. It's not grandfathered in because it's been happening a long time. It had to have started before the rule. Does that make sense for everybody?
On the test, you're looking for timing, or when did the use start?
When did the use start and when did the rule start? I told you not to do that. That's an illegal use.
Oh, it's been-
Right? I'm not yelling at you. She's like, don't yell at me anymore. So she did, poor thing. She's terrified now. We'll come back after the break. She'll be in the back row back there, relocating.
I gotta fix my chair.
Her chair hit the floor there. Yes, ma'am, Molly.
I was thinking when you just said that, you know, any of the other rules from what we had before, if you did it for so long, you're supposed to be able to keep on doing it.
This does not work that way.
This does not work that
This
way.
does not work that
Doing
way.
it
That's exactly right. So if you're an illegal use, they can shut you down at any time.
anytime.
At any time. And so that's definitely a red flag if you have somebody, because you're going to find this. There are going to be cities in North Carolina that don't bother to enforce some of this stuff. Especially small towns that are struggling for business. If you take like a town like I grew up in Tarboro, you could probably go in there and open a nuclear waste dump right on Main Street if you would hire 5 people. Because they need business that bad, right? And it wouldn't care what it was on. Nobody would say anything. But it's still what kind of a use? It's illegal because the zone, and the problem with that is an illegal use can be shut down at any time. So you always, walking on that razor thin edge of they could pull the rug out from under you any day. Does that make sense for everybody? Whereas with a legal non-conforming use, you at least have the protection of knowing you can continue doing it exactly as you have been doing it. But no improvements to it. No improvements to it. We okay with that? All right, good. A variance. Now this is the one that you will be asked about on a test, and you will probably struggle with it because you want to think that people are nice in the world, but they're not. A variance is asking for permission to break the rules. This is Alice's kid knowing they're not supposed to do what they want to do and saying, Mama, please can I? What's she going to say? No. And that's exactly what the city of Raleigh is going to say. That's exactly what the town of Cary is going to say. These are unicorns, folks. They exist in your mind only. Because these cities do not want to grant them. They want you to be in compliance. The last thing they want to do is give you a variance to break the rules. Now, I'm overstating that. They do happen. But here's the bar for getting one. And this is what you need to know for a test. The bar for getting a variance is you have to prove that you have suffered a unique hardship. Not that you've suffered some hardship, but you've suffered a completely unique hardship that nobody else has had to suffer. And that your property is completely and utterly useless if you follow all of their zoning rules. That's a pretty high bar, isn't it? They are not going to grant you a variance just because you want one. I don't want to build a house here. I want to operate a daycare. That is not, you're not going to get a variance. You have to prove that following all their rules literally makes your property worthless. That you cannot do anything with it if you follow all their rules. Yes?
So would an example of that be you want to build a house on the property, they've got setbacks off the front, you've got a stream in the back, you've got to be off.
That is exactly the example I use. That's exactly right. And that's what I was about to draw for you. That's the perfect example, JJ. So let's say we've got a little subdivision, a little cul-de-sac subdivision here that looks like this, and it's divided into 4 lots. Lot 1, Lot 2, Lot 3, Lot 4, okay? And let's say we're in Apex, and the city of Apex has setback requirements. Side setback requirements of 10 feet. That means you can't build anything within how many feet of the property line? 10 feet on the sides. So there's an imaginary dotted line 10 feet off of all of these property lines where you can't build in. This is residential zone. You've got these imaginary lines. Everybody with me so far? Apex also has front setbacks, the front of the lot, of 30 feet. Means you can't build within 30 feet of the front of the lot. So there's an imaginary line right here. Well, no problem, because you still got all this space to construct your house in. Does that make sense for everybody? This is a really cute little subdivision because we have a little stream that runs across back here like this. The only downside to that is Apex has a natural preservation zoning ordinance that says you can't build any improvements within 50 feet of a naturally flowing body of water.
You took their yard.
What do you see about lot number 3? I heard somebody say it, you can't what? You can't do anything with it. This is a case for a variance. If you own lot number 3 and you appeal to the city of Apex for a variance, you're probably going to get one, because what you can definitively show is that if you don't get a variance, what can you do with the property?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Now I've drawn this before, and I've had some people say, well, number 2 can get one as well. No, because if number 2 probably tried to get one, they would say, no, you can build your house right there. Even number 2 probably wouldn't get one, but number 3 would. These are very hard to come by. Does that make sense for everybody?
So even though you can't build anything that far back, you can still use it. So you still use the yard space. So the yard still counts. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
For
you
number
can-
2.
Sure.
But they
You just can't construct in those. That you can't build. You can't construct a home within those boundaries. So probably what they would do on lot number 3 is they'd probably give you a variance on the rear setback and the front setback. They'd squeeze you just enough room where you could fit a minimal sized home on there.
A tiny house.
It's going to be small. It's going to be a small footprint. But they would grant that variance. Does that make sense for everybody? Now on a test, they're going to try to talk you into it like it's some benevolent thing. Travis is applying for a variance because the new zoning ordinances make his property worth less money. Is that true? He might apply for one, but is he going to get it? No, he's not. What does Travis have to show? A specific, unique hardship, that he's the only one negatively impacted. I mean, I might go in there and say, listen, you rezone my property as residential and it used to be commercial. Is that going to have a negative impact on the value?
Well,
Sure. Is that a unique hardship, though? No, because everybody else's property was also rezoned at the same time from what? From commercial to residential. It's not a unique one, so it's not going to be. You're not going to have a case for a variance. Is everybody okay? Understand that definition? Those are the terminologies you could expect to see on an exam for zoning: extraterritorial jurisdiction, legal non-conforming use, illegal use, and variance. Everybody, if you're good with those, you'll be good with zoning related questions. But remember, who's enforcing these zoning requirements? Where are they coming from? The city. The city. Absolutely, they come from the city. Could you have covenants on the same property that has zoning on it?
Yes.
Yeah, the covenants would be an additional set of requirements. Could the covenants even be more strict than the zoning?
Yes.
Which one would you follow?
Strictly both.
Both, the more strict one. You know, you figure out which one's more strict and you follow that one, because you got to follow both sets of rules. Got to follow both sets of rules. Got it? Let's do this. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we talk about some subdivision rules. You need to know the rules for that process. First of all, what phrase have we already talked about in relation to subdivisions a lot? We talked about it with property descriptions.
Plat map.
A plat map. A plat map is simply a drawing of a subdivision. So when you look at this timeline right here, a lot of it is based on the plat map. In fact, all of it is based on the plat map. You need to know this timeline. This timeline is really important to you as a real estate broker because it dictates when you can do certain things as part of the land sale process. When we are creating a new subdivision, this only matters when we're creating a new subdivision. This does not apply when we're selling land or selling property or selling homes in an existing subdivision where the plat map has already been finalized, okay? So we're talking about a brand new subdivision. The land was just divided out. First of all, plat maps actually come in two forms. They come in a preliminary form and a final form. Why do you think there's two stages there, the preliminary stage and the final stage? What are we allowing for that might happen? Changes, exactly. Changes could potentially happen. Now, there is a danger to making changes that I'm going to talk about in just a second. You can't make changes after the final plat map is recorded. That makes sense, right? The word final. It is the final version of the plat map. Coincidentally, you can't transfer ownership of any of the lots on that plat map until you have recorded what kind of plat map? The final one. In other words, you can't actually close on any lot on that map until the map has been finalized. That protects people from the plat map changing after they've already bought in the subdivision. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that would be a bad thing. If you buy a lot in a subdivision and you think you bought one thing and then you come back a month later and you find out that what used to be one lot behind you is now 3 lots because they went back and changed the plat map. That cannot happen. Is everybody with me on that? So we cannot close on a single lot in the subdivision or on the plat map until that final version of the plat map has been recorded. However, we might start marketing those lots before the final plat map is recorded. So, if you look at the beginning of this process, what is the first step in creating a subdivision? Recording what? Recording the preliminary plat map. Here's what I want you to know about before that. Before that, there is no subdivision. Before that, there are no lots to sell. So if you were asked a test question, could you write a contract on a lot in a subdivision where the preliminary plat map has not been recorded, what would your answer be?
No.
No, because there's no lot to write a contract for. Does that make sense? The lot does not exist because it's part of a big piece of land that has yet to be subdivided. Now, once the preliminary plat map is recorded, then we can start to market the property or sell the property. Sell simply means write a contract on. When you put it under a contract, you've sold it. Now that's different than closing, right? Transferring ownership is closing. We can actually write contracts when we only have a preliminary plat map. We just can't do what with those contracts? We can't close on them until the plat map has gone final. So, examples of things that you could do after the preliminary plat map. You could write contracts. You could take deposits. You could reserve lots. You can do all of those things. once the preliminary plat map's recorded. But before you can actually go to closing, what do we have to do with that plat map? Record the final one. That's why it says step 4 down there, lots can be conveyed. Does that make sense for everybody? Now, I'm going to tell you a secret that developers don't want you to know right now, and it may save your client thousands of dollars at some point in your real estate career. Let's say we've completed step number 1. We have a preliminary plat map. New subdivision. There's 10 lots on the plat map. Can I write a contract on one of those lots? We've got the preliminary plat map recorded. Can I write a contract? Yes. Now on that contract, it's going to have a legal description of the property. Does that make sense to everybody? And what description is it going to have? Reference to a recorded what? Plat map. And the one we're going to be referring to is the what? The preliminary one that's been recorded. Are you with me so far? So when you look on that sales contract, you're going to see the property description say something like, it's Book of Maps, numbered 1787, page 385, lot number 3. You can see something like this as the legal description that's on that sales contract. Are you with me so far? Now, can the builder begin construction on the house?
Yes.
Yes. Can the builder charge us all kinds of non-refundable deposits as part of that process? Yes, we're under contract. They're free to charge us deposits. All the house is being constructed. Everything's moving along. A week before our scheduled closing, and we're the first house that's scheduled to close in the subdivision. A week before our scheduled closing, I get a phone call from the builder. And the builder says, I'm going to email you a copy of the plat map. I need your buyer to initial it, please. And I'm going to say, my buyer's initialed the plat map when we went under contract. And the builder's going to say, yeah, we had to make a slight change over on lot number 10. It's not on your folks' lot. It's not even on their street. It's on the street behind them. We hit some granite when we were putting in the drainage pipes, and so we had to move the drainage easement about 3 feet to the left on lot number 10. No big deal, right? Doesn't sound like a big deal. Doesn't impact our lot. Here's the problem for the builder. What kind of plat map was he working off of? Preliminary. What has he now done to that preliminary plat map? He's changed it. When he changes it, if you were to go now to Book of Maps 1787, page 385, you're going to see that plat map. And you know what's going to be written across it in big letters? Cancel. Because the change obliterated the old plat map. The new plat map is going to be recorded in place of the old one. Does that make sense? Yes. And guess what? The new one's going to be found on in a different book, on a different page. Are you with me on that? Think about our sales contract. Yeah. What does our sales contract say they are selling us? Lot number 3 on this plat map. Can they sell us lot number 3 on this plat map? Right now, the builder's in breach of contract. Aren't they?
Yes.
Why do they need my clients to initial the new plat map?
So they
need my clients to accept the change. Because right now, we don't have a contract any longer. Let me ask you a question. I said the builder could charge a bunch of non-refundable deposits, right? Right at that moment, what does the buyer have the right to do? Walk away and get every penny back. Because the thing that the builder agreed to sell them does not exist. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? So, if you ever get that call, as a real estate broker, recognize what that represents. Right? Yes, ma'am, Michelle.
Could the buyer negotiate at that point in time?
Potentially, they certainly have some leverage, right? You know, because the builder's expecting to close this house the next week, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you say to the builder, no, I don't believe I will. I don't believe I will sign that plat map. Why don't we just cancel the whole thing and give me all my money back? Is the builder going to immediately start backpedaling on some things? Well, you know, you told us you wanted that fence. I think we can work on that for you. Because you all of a sudden you have leverage that you did not have before. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, in the current market, you might not have that leverage because they may be able to resell it instantly to somebody else and not care if you walk away. But depends on the market. Yes, ma'am.
So does that work even though the lot that they tell you that they're selling you is not the lot that they actually sell you?
Yes. Yes. In fact, that's even worse. That's even more egregious. Well, yeah, because they're not even selling you the same remote piece of property. Did that happen?
When I bought my house, the house right beside me, they said that was my lot. They walked me around that lot, but they sold me the other lot.
What did the contract say? Which one did the contract refer to?
The first one.
The contract referred to the first one, but then they sold you the other one.
And the other one actually won than mine. But they gave me the other house for the same price.
For the same price to try to make it right. Well, it's good that they did that at least. You know, ultimately you accepted it, so it's done. But at that point in time, when that change came up, you could have said, "Nope, I'm out," and they would have had to give you all your money back because they can't convey what they promised to convey. Yeah, I see another hand. Are we good? Everybody all right? Are we good on this process, this stage right here, these stages? So make sure you can answer a test question. If you saw a test question asking what could you do if a preliminary plat map was not recorded and somebody came in and inquired about the lots, what do you think the answer to that question is going to be? If somebody comes and talks to you and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about lot number 3, and you don't even have a preliminary plat map recorded, what can you do?" Nothing. Take your name and number, we'll call you back later. We'll call you back when that lot is available. But that's it. Because you can't have a discussion or a negotiation about lot number 3 when lot number 3 does not what? Exist. Good. Yes.
Can you get a building permit and site plan versus
The question was, can you get a building plan and site plan approved on a preliminary plat map? And the answer is yes. And very often that is the case. Yeah, they will. They will approve them. Yes, they would have to correct any contracts they had written, and they probably have to go back and refile with the planning and zoning offices, and yep, sure do. Okay? Now remember, this only applies to basically the first couple of lots on a plat map, because once they, if you look and they've already conveyed ownership of at least one property on that plat map, they've recorded which version? The final, so it's over. Okay? All right?
Travis?
Yes?
What kind of time frame maybe from step 1 to step 3? That just depends on how big
It depends on how
fast
big, it depends on the speed with which the developer moves. Some of them record them the same day. Some of them preliminary and final all at one time, you know. Some of them it's months between preliminary and final. Most of them wait as long as they possibly can to finalize it, because what they'll do is they want to leave themselves room to make a change if they have to. You know, they want to leave that flexibility open as long as they possibly can. They don't want to make the change, but that's better than not being able to at all.
Also, were those phases too?
Well, and that's right. So phases really are just different subdivisions, right? So they'll keep them on very small plat maps for this reason, right? So that they don't have 100 lots on one plat map. They'll do them in phases of smaller batches of lots. Okay? This is also the point in time where the covenants are going to be attached to the property in most cases. Remember, it's the owner of a property who has the right to attach restrictive covenants. And at this point in time, the developer is the owner of the property. So usually this is when your protective or restrictive covenants are going to be attached to the property at the time of subdivision. That's the most convenient time to do it, because you can just blanket apply it all at once. These rules apply to all of these lots on this plat map. That's usually when this happens as well. street disclosure is a big deal for us as real estate brokers. There's probably not a single thing that's more of a hot topic right now with real estate brokers as far as what they need to be doing and what they're not doing. It is really important that a buyer knows whether they have public streets or private streets. And by public streets, I mean they are maintained by the city, county, or state. And by private streets, I mean they are maintained by the property owners themselves. You never, ever assume that streets are public. Your assumption should always be that streets are what? Private. You assume they're private until you have absolutely proven that they are public. If you are in doubt even the slightest bit, what should you be telling the buyer? These are what? These are private streets. So that they are warned about the expense of maintaining them. These are astronomical expenses in some cases. To give you an idea of how bad this can be, there are 2 neighborhoods in Goldsboro that were in the news last year. Wayne County, Goldsboro, North Carolina. These neighborhoods were built about 20 years ago. The streets were never made into public streets. The owners of the homes in those neighborhoods had no idea that was the case. They had lived in these homes for 20 years with the basic assumption that the streets they were driving on were publicly maintained streets. And the reason they believed that was the city would plow them when it snows, and the city, you know, sends police cars up and down them, and you know, they just assumed, like most people do, that they lived on publicly maintained roadways. So they started to have problems with potholes in some of the streets. So who do you think they called? City of Goldsboro. And the city of Goldsboro said, no, we can't help you with that because those are not our streets. They belong to you. Now this was a shock to the homeowners who thought they lived on publicly maintained streets. So now, this was a neighborhood, or 2 neighborhoods, neither of which had a homeowners association. There were no dues being collected. There's no formal homeowners association. There's no reserve accounts with any money set aside. How do you have to fix the streets all of a sudden? You ever heard of pass the hat? You got to go door to door and knock and ask people, hey, will you chip in and help it? How does that go, by the way? Is that going to be a fun experience? No, because half the people are going to say, look, there ain't no potholes in front of my house. I'm not paying anything. The other half are going to say, well, I'm not paying for all of it. And so what ends up getting done? Nothing. What happens to the potholes in the meantime? They get bigger, they get worse. Well, it got so bad that Wayne County and the city of Goldsboro suspended all emergency services to the neighborhoods. No police, no fire, no EMS. Wayne County Public Schools suspended bus service in the neighborhood. The United States Postal Service, neither rain nor sleet nor hail will keep them away, but apparently potholes will. Because they suspended mail delivery in these neighborhoods because of the potholes. My understanding was it was actually a Goldsboro police car that broke an axle in one. They were so bad, so deep. They were that bad. So the city of Goldsboro sent a letter to all of the homeowners that said, you have to fix this. This is a public health emergency. You cannot have these homes not be accessible by emergency services, mail, all. You have to fix this. These are your streets, you have to fix it. You have 90 days to get it fixed. 90 days came and went. So the city of Goldsboro sent another letter that said, listen, we understand. You just, you're having a hard time. You can't seem to get your mess together and get this fixed. We're going to help you out. We're going to fix it for you. We're going to come in and we're going to take out what's there, and we're going to rebuild it according to state standards. We're going to make these public roads. Look for another envelope in the mail.
Special assessment.
Special assessment. How much do you think it was per property? $27,000 per property. $27,000 per property. Special assessment on those properties. Here's the interesting thing. The developer, long since dead. Nobody to go after there. Guess who's still in business though? The real estate firm that sold those neighborhoods and never disclosed to anybody that those streets were what? Private. Guess who's going to be sued into oblivion? The real estate brokers are. Because they did not adequately decide. This is a big deal. Always assume they're private until you find out otherwise. And the only way to find out is to contact the Department of Transportation. You actually have to contact the Department of Transportation and verify that it is a publicly maintained roadway. Do not trust the road signs. They lie. You look at a green road sign, at the bottom of it, it'll have SR number. What does SR stand for? State road. That's a lie. Because they'll issue a state road number for a privately maintained road. And here's why. I got you. I'm coming. Here's why they do that. You need to understand the difference between what we call dedication and acceptance. It's here in this bullet point right here. It says just because the streets are dedicated for public use does not mean they have been what? Accepted. Here's what happens with a lot of these private roadways. The developers fully intend for them to be public roads. The developers construct them, they build them, they finish them, and then they contact the state and they say, here you go. We are dedicating these streets to you. They belong to you. You ever had anybody try to give you a puppy?
Oh, that you don't want.
The one that you don't want. And you be like, because are there gifts that sometimes you don't want? Guess what? Streets are very often gifts that the state of North Carolina does not want. Here's what happens. When that developer dedicates the streets to the state of North Carolina, the state of North Carolina issues a state road number. Because part of the dedication process is having the correct signage up. Are you with me on that? And the signage includes the state road number. So they will tentatively issue a state road number, which you put on the signs, you put the signs up, and then they'll send an inspector out to make sure the roads are acceptable to the state of North Carolina. And then this state inspector goes through and they say, oh, no, this curb is too low. This shoulder is not wide enough over here. You need to take this up. This has only got 16 inches of gravel, and it needs to be 20 inches of gravel on this section right here. And so they make a list this long of improvements that need to be made to the road before the state will accept them into the public roadway system. Now they're having this conversation with the developer. The developer has already sold every lot in the neighborhood. They've made every dollar they can possibly make in that neighborhood. And now they're looking at a laundry list of expenses to fix these roads and get them up to state standards. Let me ask you a question. How many people in those neighborhoods do you think are aware that those roads are private at that point in time? So nobody's paying attention, right? If you're the developer and you were just handed a list and you got $120,000 worth of repairs that need to be made, and you know nobody that lives in the neighborhood is paying attention to what's going on, you just kind of like start sneaking toward the door, right? See y'all later.
Don't let that out though.
Because what does the developer know? When is this going to become an issue?
After it's all gone.
15, 20, 25 years in the future when the road starts to deteriorate. Does that make sense for everybody? And by that point, I am long gone and out of the picture. All right, now go ahead, Adrian. You don't remember anymore, do you? Sorry.
I do a little bit. When you said that the people in Goldsboro were going to sue the agency, are they going to sue just the agency or the brokers, all the brokers in it?
Oh, when you sue the firm, you sue the brokers too. Yeah, the individual.
What if they're no longer working there, they're gone? Do they reach back and find the actual ones that were selling it?
Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am. You don't ever get away from that kind of liability. Yes.
So how do subdivision make the streets?
So how does it happen? Patrice's question is a good one. How do you, and I think what she's getting at, you can correct me if I'm wrong, how do you protect yourself against this? I think that's what she's really getting at. You're not going to like the first answer. The first answer, and the best way to protect yourself, is don't buy new construction. Because if you're buying in a new construction neighborhood where the streets are, or where the homes are still being built, those streets are 100% guaranteed to be private. Because the state is never going to accept them as public roadways while construction is still going on. Because what's going to happen to those roads while construction is going on? They're going to get torn up because you've got these heavy trucks and equipment and, you know, forklifts and all that stuff coming in and out, and the state would never take over maintenance knowing that all that's going on. So this, you don't even have a prayer of this happening until the neighborhood is finished. So protection number one would be don't buy in a new construction neighborhood. Now we obviously know that's not practical for everybody. So the best you can hope for in that event is to talk to the developer and say, what kind of money do you have set aside for making the streets public? Do you have a separate account to the credit of lots of counties in the state, now Wake included? Most counties are now requiring these kinds of accounts, these kind of escrow funds for the money to be set aside for this to happen, to prevent this kind of a situation. But remember, that's a fairly recent development. You've got 20, 30 years worth of developments that happened, and a lot of these things never became public roadways. Yes, Jay.
Does an agent put it in writing that way to cover themselves?
Yes, put it in writing.
In the contract?
Yeah, in an email. That's enough. Anything in writing, so you got some verification.
How do I check on my streets to see if they're private or public?
Contact the Department of Transportation. Call the NCDOT. Give them the state road number that's on the sign at the end of the street, and say, I need to know if this is a state-maintained roadway. And they'll tell you.
But if there's any development going on in your neighborhood.
If there's any development still going on, you know that it's not a state-maintained road, because they'll never accept it for you know, public purposes until it's finished. Yes, ma'am, Molly.
So, is there like particular rules or statutes that the developer can get while they're in the building process to make sure the roads already comply with the
They
state?
do, yes.
So that
And the
they don't
state
have
is
to
happy
do
to
all
give
that.
them to them along the process. They encourage them to contact them early in the process so we don't have this misunderstanding. And so a lot of developers have gotten a lot better. Here's how you know developers have gotten a lot better. How many neighborhoods do you go in now that are under construction that you're missing the top 2 inches of asphalt? You got the rumble strips going on, you know, like all the vents stick up like this high out of the street and all the curbs are like this much higher. Those are developers who have contacted the state in advance and said, tell us exactly how it needs to be. And they've built it to state standards, and they're waiting to put that top coat of asphalt on it to make it pretty at the very end, so when that state inspector comes in, they sign off on it and they accept it into public use.
So they can, if it meets everything, they can immediately
Accept it.
into public.
Absolutely. If it meets all the criteria, they will accept it into public use. Generally speaking, the criteria that they use is that no maintenance will be required for the first 20 years. That's the criteria that they use when they go out and they inspect it. In other words, they want it perfect when they take it over. Yes, ma'am.
So for road, it's not made the same as private.
You know, that's an interesting comment. I've never actually had anybody say it, but Ivy's comment is if the road's not paved, it's safe to assume it's private. Actually, there are state-maintained gravel roads, believe it or not. There are some. There are not many any longer. Most of them have been paved. But, so here's what I would do. If it's a gravel road, look at the end of it and see if it has a street sign. If it does, that street sign will have an SR number on it. Now, don't assume that means it's a state road, but contact the Department of Transportation and give them that SR number, and they will tell you if indeed it is state maintained. Yep.
So in Vale, Wake County, North Carolina, wherever, do you not have to have a permit to even start building the road based on plans and specs that they reviewed and approved and signed off on and have on?
You do. Teresa's question is a good one. Do you not have to have you do, but keep in mind that permitting process is maybe not through the same people who would be accepting the streets. So the permitting process might not be as intricate as the actual dedication and acceptance process of the roadways. They are, to their credit, they're trying to get better coordinated about this. In the past, it's been very disjointed. So now, one of the things they do now, which is a huge improvement, you may have seen streets like this. How many of you have seen a street sign that's got a yellow ribbon across the bottom of it that says private road? How many of you have seen that? That's a change within the last 5 years. So now, when you first get the state road number, so you can put your signage up, but you still are a private road, that's the signs you get now. They have that yellow ribbon that says private road on it. And you are not allowed to remove that yellow stripe. It has to be the Department of Transportation that removes that yellow stripe, so that it doesn't get removed until the street is accepted into the public system. We've gotten a lot better about current development. It's the older ones that we have to be worried about. So here's what you have to worry about. You're selling a resale house in a neighborhood. Don't make the assumption that that street is what? Public. You need to check. You need to check. Yes, ma'am, Wally.
So now, is that why during the time like snow and ice and everything, they only do the main roads and leave your little neighborhood?
It could be. It could very well be. Now, I'm not going to say that, but it could be a reason. Absolutely. As a matter of, so I'll give you an example of a funny one. My parents' neighborhood up at Lake Gaston. They've been up there for about 10 years now. They built a house up there, and they live in the neighborhood. And it's an awesome neighborhood for my parents. I'm glad they retired up there, because pretty much everybody in the neighborhood's in their same age bracket. They're all at the same point in life. It's a bunch of retirees. Honestly, it's a big drunk party every day of the week. They just decide whose house to go to and get drunk, and that's the night. They all drive golf carts everywhere, all over the place. Well, a couple years ago, the streets were starting to get in bad shape, and they contacted Halifax County and said, hey, can you send somebody out here to look at the streets, because we got a problem? And Halifax County told them, it's not our street. These are private roads, which they weren't aware of. Now, they have a little homeowners association, and they've got some reserve accounts. I think they had like $40,000 or $50,000 sitting in a reserve account, but that won't touch fixing streets in a whole neighborhood, right? So they all of a sudden have these, they started having these meetings and going, we're going to solicit the state and see if we can have them become public roads, because every other neighborhood in that area is public roadways. So they did. They contacted the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation came out there, and they were working out a deal. I was shocked. The Department of Transportation was basically going to pay for 3/4 of the cost if the neighborhood would pay for 1/4 of the cost, and they were going to redo the streets and make them public roadways. And I was like, wow, that's a really good deal. And then I called, and then my mom called me. And she's on the homeowners, but there's only like 30 houses, so so they rotate off, like it's your turn to be on the board. And she was on the homeowners board at that time. She called me. She said, "We're not going to do the streets. We decided against it." I said, "Mom, are you sure y'all want to do that? If they're going to pay for 3/4 of the cost, y'all ought to find a way to raise the money and do that. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with the whole cost." She said, "Well, there was some mitigating circumstances." I said, "What does that mean, mitigating circumstances?" You know what scuttled the whole deal and shot it down? They told them couldn't drive the golf carts in the neighborhood anymore. And so all of a sudden, these people who wouldn't pay for it before were like, no, we'll chip in. And so they all went in, and they all paid like $2,000 and got all the streets fixed, so they can ride the damn golf carts around everywhere there. Because the state told them now, because when the DOT guy was in there and he's investigating the roads, all he sees is all these old people riding around on golf carts. And he said, now you do realize that once we convert these to state roads, you can't do that anymore. And apparently that was it. They were like, we need the golf carts around here. So I guess it's all about priorities, right? Yeah. They're funny. My dad is the dock master in his neighborhood. I'm like, that is ridiculous. You know, they have a boat launch, you know, and community boat slips and a pool, and dad is the dock master. I'm like, what is your job as the dock master? Well, I have to make sure nobody uses the boat ramp that's not supposed to. I'm like, so what do you do? Sit down there all day and watch the damn boat ramp? I don't know what that means, you know? Like,
Well, you can tell them they.
no, it's not public. It's private because it's in their neighborhood, you know? So, it's crazy. They're nuts. All right, we good? All right, so you assume that now make sure you know the difference between these two words, dedication and acceptance. Just because they've been dedicated does not mean they have been what? Accepted. The developer does the dedication, it's the state that does the acceptance. All right, and it has to be both for it to be public.
So that goes with the name of the street, right?
Yes, it does a lot of, so basically, when the developer feels that the streets are ready, they will dedicate them. Then the state's going to send out the inspector to look at them and decide whether or not to accept them into the public roadway system.
And accepting them into the public roadway system doesn't mean it makes it private. I mean, it makes it public.
That doesn't mean it makes it public. Once it's accepted, it's public.
Okay, once accepted.
Dedication doesn't mean it's, if they're just dedicated, they're still private. When they're dedicated and accepted, they're public.
Okay, so like you said, if the developers slip out the door, like you said.
Before acceptance, they're private.
They're still private.
They're private. That's exactly right. And the state does the acceptance. State, city, county, who's ever going to take the road under their responsibility. We actually have still some, believe it or not, there are still a handful of private streets here in Raleigh. I was shocked to hear that. And I don't mean like in new neighborhoods, I mean like old neighborhoods that have been around for a very long time in the middle of the city, just sporadically, and they are still private streets. And there was, you know, I was actually at a City of Raleigh meeting where they were discussing that and how the city has basically just been maintaining them anyway for years and years and years because there's so much through traffic on them. You know, like people, even though they're private streets, the public doesn't know it's a private street, so the public's using them to like cut through neighborhoods and do these kinds of things. So there's this big debate about, has the city essentially made them public by taking the responsibility on all this time? So yeah, it gets to be very, very dicey.
They've been doing it for 20 years?
Yeah.
So here's the moral of the story. If they're maintaining your street, don't stir the pot, right? Leave it alone. If they're out there doing it, just leave it alone. Or call Domino's if you got potholes, right? What is that commercial about? Have y'all seen that? Like, you really believe from him? I don't know if I want somebody from Domino's paving a pothole in front of my street. I don't think that's a good idea, but, you know.
Hey, if you ain't got to pay for it.
I guess.
I don't know if they don't want to.
If I call Kay, but Carrie can come fix anything.
And charge you $27.
Yeah, but that carries bills.
I know mine are public. Everything in Carrie's public. There ain't no such thing. All right, the Interstate Land Sale Full Disclosure Act. This is a law that was passed in the late 50s, early 60s, when there was a lot of abuse going on. Buyers were basically being taken advantage of in out-of-state transactions. So I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson here. I find sometimes if you have some reference, you understand why a law was passed, it helps you understand it. In the early 60s, Florida was basically a swamp. The whole state of Florida, some would argue it still is, but I would, you know. But in the 60s, basically the entire state of Florida was swampland. But what was happening at that point in time is land developers would do these caravans in the northern part of the United States, and they would do them during the middle of winter. And they would go to places like Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and there's 8 feet of snow on the ground and it's 0 degrees outside, and they would bring in a truckload of lemons and oranges, and then they would hold an event. And if you came and showed up, they'd give you a free bag of oranges, and they would tell you all about how you could buy land in Florida that you could retire on for $50 down and $50 a month. And if you live in Michigan where it's 0, and that's a real temperature in Michigan, by the way. The first time I went to Flint, Michigan, I walked out of the airport, And I got in the rental car and it said 0. I'm like, so does that mean there's not a temperature or what? I don't even know what that number equates to in like real world things. It's cold up there, folks. I mean, like, water doesn't move for like 6 months at a time. It just sits there, you know? And so, if you go up to Michigan and it's 0 degrees and 3 feet of snow on the ground, and somebody tells you it's 82 degrees right now in Florida and you can own this piece of land for $50 down and $50 a month, what do? Sign me up. You know, they would go in and say, we just picked these oranges from your land down in Florida, which is a little, you know what, anyway, but that's what they would say to people. Well, here's what happened. People were buying land in Florida, but it would take them years before they'd ever actually go see it, because back then, I mean, people didn't travel like they do now. So you've been paying on this thing for 5 years, and you say, honey, let's take a trip down to Florida. Let's go look at our land down there. I know we didn't do anything with it yet, but let's go look at it. So you go down there, and you go to the development company that was selling you the land, because you're still making monthly installments on this thing, and you say, hey, it's good to see you. I'm so-and-so from Michigan. I'd love to see my property. Can you take me out and show it to me? Yes, sir. And so they put you in the car, and they drive you out in the middle of the swamp, and they pull over on the side of the road, and you get out and you say, is this my lot? And they say, well, close. Your lot is about 27 miles that way, out in the middle of the swamp. And so these people are like, well, how am I supposed to use that? Well, that's not their concern. And so, as a response to those kind of sales processes, Congress passed this law called the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Interstate just means across state lines. So basically, it was targeted at property developers who were selling property out of state. Does that make sense for everybody? They were crossing state lines. And it applies to any subdivision with 25 or more lots. So a subdivision that has less than 25 is exempt from this law. Does that make sense for everybody? Now, here, you don't need to know a lot of details because largely this law is not paid attention to anymore. And number one, here's the reason why. Doesn't pretty much everybody advertise across state lines now? Because where's the first place we put a piece of property? On the internet. We're advertising across state lines, country lines, and, you know, probably extraterrestrial is all we know. So everything happens. But if you see it on the test, here's what the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act says. If you're selling somebody a property in another state, piece of land, in a subdivision that has at least 25 lots, you have to give them an information packet about the land. You have to tell them how far the property is from a paved road, how far it is from a post office, from shopping, from a hospital. Basically, you have to tell them what they're buying. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? So if you saw it on a test, the things that you would be looking for, like the key things for the Interstate Land Sales Disclosure Act, the advertisement's happening what? Across state lines. It's on subdivisions of how many lots? 25. At least 25. And you're giving the buyer what? Information about the property, like how far it is from certain things. That's all you need to know about it. Okay? Everybody good with that? It's a federal law. Don't make assumptions when you're disclosing stuff. These land use controls are public knowledge. That means don't assume. It means go do the research. Can you do the research and find out the zoning on a property? Sure. Can you do the research and find the covenants on a piece of property?
Yes.
Absolutely you can. Can you do the research and find out if the streets are public or private?
Yes.
Yes. Don't make assumptions. Especially as a listing broker. You find out and you have the information available so that you can give it to potential buyers. That's the long and short of it as far as we go. The last, or one of the last types of public land use restrictions we want to talk about are building codes. Building codes are a land use restriction because they govern basically the minimally acceptable safe level of construction. Notice I said minimally acceptable. When you get on a test, they'll say things like, building codes are designed to provide the best construction practices. Do building codes give you the best construction practices? No, they give you the worst acceptable construction practices. Can you always exceed the building code?
Yes.
Yes, there's always better than the building code. Building codes don't tell you what the best practices are, they tell you what the least acceptable practices are. How far can you go down and still be okay? That's what building codes tell you. Is everybody all right with that? Now, their primary purpose is safety. You need to know the difference between a permit, a building permit, and something called a certificate of occupancy. Now, I want to talk about a certificate of occupancy first, because I'm going to tell you what it's not. A certificate of occupancy has nothing to do with occupancy. It has nothing to do with the property being safe to be occupied. A certificate of occupancy simply closes out a permit. They are the beginning and end of the same process. So when would you go get a building permit, you think? Before you start. Because you are asking for permission to build. Does that make sense? You're asking for permission to construct or improve on the property. You get a certificate of occupancy at the end of the construction to prove that you got the permit, you had the work inspected, and the work meets the minimum building codes. Does that make sense for everybody? Here's what I mean when I say a certificate of occupancy has nothing to do with occupancy. Can you live or occupy in a ceiling fan? No. But you can get a certificate of occupancy for a ceiling fan. Because if you apply for a permit to have a ceiling fan installed in your living room, when they come out and inspect the ceiling fan and they say, yes, this has been safely installed, guess what they're going to give you? A certificate of occupancy. I have seen a CO issued in a dump that you wouldn't stand in if your life depended on it. Because, I'll give you an example. If the whole house is falling down, and I go get a permit to replace the water heater, are they going to give me the permit?
Yes.
Yes. And when I call them back and say, okay, the water heater's been replaced, come inspect it, are they going to come inspect it?
Yes.
Are they going to inspect the entire property, or are they just going to inspect the installation of the water heater? The installation of the water heater. And assuming the water heater has been correctly installed to meet the minimum building codes, what are they going to issue? A certificate of occupancy for the water heater. That's it. So the certificate of occupancy just closes out the permit. The permit gets opened, the CO closes it. Is that okay for you guys? Everybody good with that? It doesn't say the property's safe. It doesn't say the property can be occupied. It just says you followed the building codes, you got the permit, you followed the process. That's it. There are statewide building codes. So the state of North Carolina has a minimum building code. It applies to all 100 counties. Can each county have stricter building codes?
Yes.
Yes. Can each city have their own building codes? Those cannot be less strict than the state, but they can be what? More strict than the state. So that's where it comes in, this idea, like, remember way back we talked about modular homes? Remember, modular homes are constructed in a factory and then assembled on site, right? They're real property. We said that modular homes must meet your local building codes. So when you buy or purchase a modular home, they have to find out where you want it first so that they can get a copy of your local building code so that the home can be constructed to comply with your local building codes wherever it's going to be. It doesn't matter that it's being built in a factory in Tennessee. It matters it's going to be put on a lot in Apex. So they're going to build it according to Apex's building codes. Does that make sense for everybody? What houses would they not build to the local building codes? Mobile homes or manufactured homes. Those would not meet your local building codes.
It's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle. It's a car. Okay? You good on this? Good. Good. Flood hazard restrictions. Basically, the federal government maintains a set of flood maps, and That will determine whether or not your property is located in a flood hazard area. If it is, you're probably going to have to maintain flood insurance, because no lender is going to give you a loan on a property that is located in a flood hazard area unless you maintain flood insurance. And the only place you can buy flood insurance is from the federal government. It's called the National Flood Insurance Program. It is operated and maintained by FEMA. FEMA draws the flood maps, FEMA operates the flood insurance program. That's all you need to know about that. Yep.
I'm just okay, but I was just curious, is it once in 100 years, 500, like what is it would require are you required to have insurance if it's a certain risk factor?
Yes, and that's going to depend on your lender mostly. It would be your lender that would require it. If you don't owe any money, you don't have to have it. But now here's the thing. FEMA's rule is this. If you're in a 100-year floodplain and you choose not to have flood insurance and your home floods, FEMA will not bail you out. They will not offer you assistance. Now,
My uncle lost his house that way.
Yes.
In Hurricane Sandy.
Mhm.
He lived on Long Island.
Yep.
And he lived right up the road from the inlet, Fire Island Inlet, and his house was gone. He didn't want to pay his flood insurance because he owned his home, he's retired, he's done, gone. Right down the road, house gone. Awful.
Yeah, it is awful. It is. If you're in if the property's in, and this is easy to look up, again, if you ever want to know if property's in flood hazard area, you go to FEMA.gov and the flood maps are right on there. You can search by address.
FEMA was all up and down the block, and then sorry.
Yeah, right. They will. Yes, ma'am.
So what, and I believe this would be similar to like the street issues. If a realtor did not disclose this information to the agent, oh, well, that wouldn't matter anyway because the lender would go ahead and take precedence over that.
The lender's going to step in and say you got to have flood insurance.
I just
Absolutely.
thought of it.
Yep. Now, when you're listing a property, you should do the research so that you can tell buyers still that this property is located in a flood hazard area or some portion, because it may not be the whole property. They don't do it by property lines. They draw the flood map. So you could have like 3 or 4 acres on the back of a property that's located in a flood hazard area, but the home itself be on the front part of the property, which is not located in the flood hazard area. So it doesn't necessarily impact the entirety of a property. Okay? We talked about highway access issues. Last couple things in this chapter. One is the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is a federal law that only impacts public facilities, not private facilities, public facilities. So shopping centers, restaurants, hotels, real estate schools, office buildings, commercial facilities. Pretty much any piece of commercial real estate is going to be considered a place of public accommodation. And therefore it's going to be subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now here's what the Americans with Disabilities Act says. It says if this is a publicly accessible facility, then you have to provide an equal level of access to all people regardless of their disability. Whether that disability is physical, mental, emotional, whatever that disability is, you have to provide an equal level of access. By the way, coming to a website near you, this is going to be extended to the web as of next year. All of your publicly facing websites, so like if you have a website as a real estate broker, will have to be ADA compliant, which would mean, for example, all of the text has to be translatable or readable by a reader program. You know, so if somebody has a vision impairment and they have a software program that translates websites for people with that situation, you would have to have fonts that are compliant with those translators so that the website could be read to them. Or if you have videos on the website, for example, where somebody's talking, you have to have subtitles. So if somebody has a hearing deficiency, they could see and read what was being said in the videos. That's going to be required in 2019 as part of the ADA.
But not like on YouTube.
I don't know how it's going to impact sites like YouTube, but certainly for, you know, public services like real estate brokers, hotels, restaurant websites. So, you know, there's gonna be a lot of revamping of websites. You're starting to see it take place. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
And you may not know this, but do you think that they would have the subtitles versus someone actually doing sign language? If it was,
I think subtitles in most cases
Okay.
would be easier, and that does comply with the rule.
Okay.
You know, and so I imagine most are going to go the route that's easiest, and putting subtitles on an existing video is a lot, because you can just get a video editing software and overlay subtitles on the same video you already have, whereas you'd have to pay somebody to be videoed signing it, you know. But either one would work. But for your purposes now, from a real estate perspective, this is going to come into play like, for example, Ivy works in a commercial real estate office, right? And so you do their website, but you also, you all have, and I'm sure if you had this conversation with Greg about the ADA, when they come into these properties and start looking at retrofitting and changing and upfitting and fixing them up, the ADA is always at the top of the list of things they have to worry about. Things that, you know, for example, look at the door handles in this room. There are no round handles because those are not ADA compliant, because someone who has a physical disability cannot exit that room. In fact, if you have somebody, for example, that is a paraplegic, they may not be able to grasp that kind of a handle. But as long as it's a push handle, that is ADA compliant. And you have to have at least one exit that opens out. Now that door is not ADA compliant, but that one is. Does that make sense? And so as long as there's at least one, then it's an ADA. And look at the exits on the front and back of the building. Even when they're locked, they have those push paddles so that you can never be locked in, right? That's an ADA compliance thing. The width of the doors. We have to be, as a real estate school, either located on the first floor of a building or in a building that has an elevator. Where we happen to be both. We're on the first floor and the building has an elevator. But you have to have that. Restrooms have to be accessible. So you see this around you all the time. Now there's two words that we're going to talk about them later in the class. You don't have to put them in your notes yet, but you can if you want. There's accommodations and there's modifications. Those are the two ways that you can get into compliance with the ADA. Sometimes you may have to do one or the other, and sometimes both. Here's the difference. A modification is a change in the facility. So coming in and taking off the round door handles and putting the push handle kind on, that's a modification because you're changing the facility. Does that make sense to everybody? Changing a parking spot from a regular spot to a handicap spot is an accommodation. You didn't change the facility, you changed the way you utilize the facility. Does that make sense? So an accommodation might be as simple as you have a different process for somebody that has a physical disability, for example. I've seen facilities that don't have elevators where they would come to your vehicle if you had a mobility problem. That's an accommodation rather than a modification. The ADA allows you to get in compliance with either or. They don't specify which it has to be. They just say you have to provide equal access, whether it's through accommodation or modification. So like if you're operating an apartment complex and someone comes in who's in a wheelchair and you have first floor units available and you have second floor units available, and it's a 3-level apartment building. Generally in those facilities, the apartments on the second floor are going to rent for the cheapest rent. Why is that?
Because you don't have to travel all the way up to the top of the floor.
Yeah, people where?
Right.
Both sides. Nobody wants to be in the middle. And so your second floor is going to be your lowest rent level. You get somebody who's handicapped that comes in and they're looking at the apartments, and you have 2 first floor units and 2 second floor units. Your first floor units rent for $1,000 a month, and your second floor units rent for $900 a month. And the building does not have an elevator. Your choices are to modify the building and put an elevator in, or offer them the first floor unit at what? $900 a month. That's making an accommodation for their handicap. Does that make sense? Okay, those would be the two options that you would have with the ADA. Okay, is everybody good with that? Last thing I'm going to mention about this, with the ADA, service animals. A service animal is not a pet. What I have are pets. They don't provide any service. You look at them and they eat and fart. That's it. That's, you know, there's no service there that I can discern. I love them, but there's no service being offered there. Service animals are not pets. You don't get to determine what is and what is not a service animal. That's the sticking point on this thing. The ADA defines service animals as two species of animal: dogs and miniature horses. Miniature horses, yes. Dogs, miniature horses. So you can restrict to those two species. Do you have to allow a service cat? No. You don't have to allow a service rat or bat or snake or any of that in an ADA facility, in a public facility. But if somebody shows up with a dog and they say, this is my service animal, you are allowed to ask two questions and only two questions. Number one, do you have a disability? Notice I did not say, what is your disability? What's wrong with you? You look fine to me. What's wrong with you? Do you have a disability? That's question number one. If they answer yes, you go on to question number two. If they say no, then what? Then it's not a service animal. Okay? But if they say yes, I have a disability, then you are permitted to ask question number two, which is the animal trained to provide assistance with your disability? Notice, I didn't ask for proof of the training, or what is the animal trained to do, or what do they do for you, or where's his certificate, or where's his vest, or where's his name tag. Or it is simply, is the animal trained to provide assistance with your disability? If they answer yes to both of those questions, folks, then it is a service animal, and you must accommodate it.
So, I have a family member who has a dog, and she moved into a apartment complex, and she had to go to the doctor.
Can I pause you right there?
Right. No, it's different.
What kind of facility is that? That's a residential facility, right? So this law does not apply.
Okay.
This law does not apply. Now, when we get to fair housing, we will talk about that. You can go ahead and ask your question now, but I just wanted to stop you and point out the difference, right? That this law does not apply there because that's a private residential facility.
Well, now I'm just saying they made her go and get all this stuff and, you know.
Which they should not have done, because even under the Fair Housing Act, they're not supposed to do that.
And then it also, when she had to get the paperwork to say about the service animal, it then also disclosed her disability.
What her disability is, which is a big no-no.
Yeah, which is, against medical.
It is, absolutely, absolutely. And here, folks, just don't stress yourself over it. I see so many people get so bent out of shape that they're taking advantage. They might be, but don't worry. They got bigger fish to fry in life, you know? If they won't bring their dog in and they're willing to tell you that that's a service animal, just get out of the way and let them go. Because all you stand to do is get yourself in trouble by pushing back against them. There was some couple here in Raleigh recently on television that they kicked a lady with her service dog out of a restaurant, and they ended up on WRAL. And I mean, man, I love animals, don't get me wrong, but some of the comments on that article, people were talking about like burn the restaurant down and all. I mean, you know, it's just not worth it. It's not. Don't even try to get into that argument. Yes, ma'am.
When I was a manager at Walmart, we didn't even, you couldn't even blink. You couldn't question no customer. I mean, that dog made a mistake in the store, it did not matter.
Right.
Once that dog walked through the door, you didn't even have the right to walk up to them and ask them.
Well, because Walmart didn't want to take the liability of a lawsuit about it.
Yeah.
And if you notice, many retailers have taken that approach. Now, in fact, when you go to Lowe's now, it even says right on the door, well-behaved animals allowed. Because, and it's not because they particularly wanted to allow dogs in there, it's just they did not want their door greeters to have to worry with the stress of evaluating is this a service animal or not.
And if they do, you know, because the customer can get very offended just
Sure.
for asking those questions.
Sure, they can,
And
they absolutely can. Did y'all see the peacock recently? A lady tried to get on a plane with a surface peacock, and she got mad because the airline denied it. And she said that they were violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I'm sitting at home going, no, they're not. No, they're not. That is not a dog or a horse. That's a peacock. They showed the peacock sitting right there in the airport, like big as day. Like,
With Walmart, you get these little dogs that ain't even big as your hand.
Right.
I'm thinking, oh, okay.
he provides a service. He kills mice. I don't know. You know, that's the service. Yes, ma'am, Michelle.
And I heard you say well behaved. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I get it, but what if your service dog, miniature or, dog or miniature horse is not well behaved?
You can certainly deny or remove an animal if they have demonstrated that they are not well behaved. But, you know, that's going to be a judgment call. You know, don't do it preemptively. Please don't do it like that's a pit bull. If it's a service animal, it's a service animal. The law says dogs, right? You know, if that specific animal shows some sign of aggression or something, then that's a different story. But, you know, I just always tell people when I teach these classes all the time, just stay away from it. You don't want to be in that argument. Whatever your personal feelings are about the issue aside, you don't want to put your livelihood at risk by having an argument about a service animal. Yes, ma'am.
So then, as a property manager, if you had a tenant that did have, as a commercial, you know, if you had a tenant that had a dog, your first question should always be, first,
do you have a disability?
Not go straight to, hey, it can't be here.
That's right. And if they identify it as a service animal, you know, let them first identify it as a service animal. If they come into your office and they've got the dog with them, you know, you are free to say, you know, I'm sorry, we don't allow pets in here. It's up to them to identify it as a service animal. You've not done them any disservice by saying we don't allow pets, as long as you don't double down and say, well, that's a pet. You know, like, you know, if they say, no, this is my service animal, then you are permitted to ask those two questions. Yes, you can say our policy is no pets, unless and you can even say if you want to, unless that's a service animal, you know, or let them say it. But you know but just the two questions. Don't ask for proof or verification, or we need a doctor's note, or you know that's where people get in trouble. And by the way, the miniature horses, the reason miniature horses, there's actually a very good reason they were specially called out. They make really good vision assistance animals rather than seeing eye dogs, because number one, they have vision equivalent to a dog. Number two, they live 3 times longer than a dog, and they have a working lifespan of 25 years. So if you think about that from the perspective of a disabled person, to have the same animal for a 25-year span versus the 7 or 8 years that a working dog has as far as a working lifespan, that's a huge difference to not have, because you imagine how traumatic it is to have to change dogs, you know, or change animals if you rely on that animal. The other thing they're really good for, just because of their size, is people who have mobility issues. They put harnesses on them, and so they can lean on them. Like they're trained, like if the person falls down, they will get right up next to them so that the person can use them like a, you know, basically like a bench to push up on. You know, so they're really good. There's a lady in Chapel Hill that has one. He's the cutest thing I've ever seen.
They're hard to find. It's part of my job, what I do. It's very difficult to find a facility that offers miniature horses as service animals to train, and to train the family and the person with a disability to find a horse. I've actually had patients of mine that have requested that, and I remember years ago when I was a case manager, I was horse. A horse,
yeah. Right. First time I saw it in Chapel Hill, I was like, I'm like, that is a big dog. And so I said, it's a horse. I'm like, that's a small horse. You know, and so I went and looked, and I grew up with horses. I've never seen a miniature one. I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my God. And then I realized I almost passed out. He wears Jordans. He has Nikes on, y'all. It's the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life. She dresses him up. He has Nikes on. but she's blind, and he's her vision assistance animal, and so she lives in Chapel Hill, and Chapel Hill has like free transit, so she calls when she wants to go out to dinner, she calls Chapel Hill Transit, they come pick her up. He gets in the front seat of the van and wears a seatbelt. He sits in it, so you see the van going down the street, and he's got a horse sitting in the front, and he just sits over there like, yeah, you know? I mean, and he knows, like the restaurant she goes to, he knows exactly where to go. You know, he'll take her to the same table every time. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I've never really seen are they like the size of a big dog, like a great
big dog, real big dog, like mastiff size. You know, like 125, 150 pounds. Yeah, I mean, they're big dogs. You know, so, you know, think of the biggest dog. They're not as big as a Dane. They're not that tall, but they're stocky. They're very thick. You know, so they're about this high, but they're about this wide. So they're real thick. Yeah, like a mastiff type size. So, yes, ma'am.
So if it is a service dog, and like we were just talking to her, if we just say, you know, we don't allow dogs to give that service unless it's a service animal, and they say yes it is, why do we have to ask?
You don't have to ask. No, you don't have to ask. I'm saying that's all you're permitted to ask. If you feel like you want to go further, then those two questions are as far as you can go. What I would recommend, if somebody specifically identifies it as a service animal, I would say, okay, that's it. You know,
Because the second question is, does your animal provide a service for your disability?
is your animal trained to provide a service for your disability? You know, so again, I don't want to have to be that careful with the questions. If somebody identifies it as a service animal and it's a dog or a horse, I'm accepting it. I'm accepting it. Simple as that. Okay? Last little note here deals with restrictive covenants. Remember, restrictive covenants are private land use controls. Private controls, they run with the land. Who enforces them? Homeowners or other property owners in the same neighborhood. How many does it take to enforce them? One. Just one. Now, two things you need to know, and you need to make sure you understand these. Covenants are always enforceable, even when they are in conflict with zoning. If the zoning says one thing and the covenants say another, which one do you follow? Both. You follow the more strict one. Whichever is more strict, that's the one you follow. There is, however, one time where you don't follow the covenants. And you need to know it because it's probably going to show up on a test. And I don't have it on a slide, so you're going to have to write it down. I forgot to make a slide for it. There's one time where you don't follow the covenants. Remember, these are private restrictions. Developers put these on. And they're pretty much free to place any restriction on property they want. Are there covenants that are around on properties? How long do covenants last? Forever. So are there maybe neighborhoods that were built in the 40s, 50s, early 60s that have covenants on them?
Yes.
How do I ask this question? Are there likely to be covenants from that particular period of time which we might find offensive by today's standards?
Yes.
Absolutely. Are there likely to be covenants from that time which would be clear violations of federal law, like fair housing law and anti-discrimination laws?
Yes.
Those covenants are unenforceable. They are invalid because they are illegal. So even if you see them, and they'll pop up from time to time because some developer was a jerk in 1952 when he built this neighborhood and said, you know, no, whether it was referred to as Negroes or colored or, you know, whatever the terminology that was used, can purchase in the neighborhood because that was unfortunately legal at that point in time. Well, the covenants stay there because they last forever. But federal law overrides that. Does that make sense for everybody? So if you find something like that in a covenant, and if they ask you about that on a test, those are not going to be enforceable. Anything that violates a federal or state law like that would simply not be enforceable. It would be invalid, even though it's still there. some states have actually passed laws that say once those come to public attention, they are actually stricken from the covenants. They're removed. Like, we don't have such, I wish we did, you know, rather than just telling people, oh, just ignore it. Because to me, it's offensive that it's still there. But, you know, for test purposes, make sure you're aware that they're not enforceable. Yes, sir.
Did you say earlier that there's covenants that I can actually look up online that pertain to my specific neighborhood? Is
Yes.
it recorded as such as they presented to me?
Absolutely.
Where do I go for that?
You go to the Franklin County Clerk of Court Register of Deeds website. You may have to contact them and ask them what is the specific way to search for covenants in Franklin County.
Okay.
Now, for example, in Wake County, it's very easy. If you go to the Wake County Clerk of Court's website, there's a little "How do I" box over there, and if you click on that, one of the first things is "How do I find covenants?" And when you click on that, it'll tell you exactly what to search for, what things to put in the boxes to find the covenants on the neighborhood. Franklin County, you may have to contact them and ask them exactly how to find your covenants, but they will be publicly recorded and you'll be able to find them. Okay, everybody good? That is it for chapter 6. All right, so let's do this. Quick break, like 5-minute pee break, because I know you want to get out of here a little bit early. And we've got just one slight thing to cover before you go, and then I'm going to release you. You've got to do a little bit of license law, because it's on the quiz I'm going to send home with you. And then you are out of here. Okay?
License law on the cover?
License law is not a chapter. It's actually Appendix A in the back of your book, but you have slides about it. It should be the first set of slides before chapter 1. Okay.